back up a bit. You came to Michigan in the late 50s, 58 right. or so, and your community involvement then focused around civil rights activities?
Absolutely.
Were those because of your role in the church, or was that?
There were a group of us, Lynn. There were mostly Catholic lay people and clergy, Protestant clergy and their spouses. Most of them, the spouses, were female. And we got very involved in fair housing. We were involved in the first fair housing legislation, in the country, and passed a fair housing ordinance in Flint. But we also were involved in integrating housing. There was a group called Home Incorporated, where a white couple would buy a house for a mixed race couple or for an African American couple, and then sell it to them. And that was a way to integrate neighborhoods. We also did a lot of picket lines. I mean, my kids used to think that Sunday was time to go picketing, not picnicking, but picketing. So they'd be out there with their picket signs. So there were those kinds of things. I did not get south. I was either pregnant or had little kids, and I thought about that. I did not feel that I wanted to do that, but we did it in Michigan.
That experience carried on for a period of time. Were you then also involved in partisan politics, or
there was there was an overlap there, and certainly once I got involved in the state Democratic Party, most of the close friends that Olaf and I have today were all people one time or another had been in that civil rights movement, and a lot of them have moved on to be judges or legislators or whatever. But we carried that passion into the party, and we certainly carried it into the anti-war movement, and carried that into the party. So they were all intermixed. But I was also at that time of course a party officer, and so there was that that's a more conservative role. So that was always a bit of a conflict. But
did you have to run in a challenge race for party
never
secretary?
did. I ran. Zoltan Ferenczi, who, as you remember, ran for governor in 1966, asked me if I would run, and specifically for recording secretary. And would I run against Kay Nye? I think Kay's husband was a professor at MSU. And I said, sure. I didn't know Kay Nye, but I thought that would be fun, right? I didn't even think about it. I said, sure. Of course, then she pulled out of the race. So no one ran against me. And in the entire time I ran for recording secretary, for vice chair, and for chair of the Democratic Party, I never had anyone run against me.
Oh, easy
way to run. Easy way to run, right? Yeah. So it was a relatively easy. But you work hard. I mean, you have to honor, all the counties and districts, and you do a lot of work with them, and you keep in touch, and you always work with them because they're really the backbone of the party, and so you always honor them and work with them, and that makes a difference.
You mentioned, and I'd be interested in hearing you reflect some more on, because there has to have been a tension all the way through your partisan involvement, a tension between commitment to issues and commitment to the structure of the party and the operation of the party, where I'm assuming you're trying there to be as broad-based and inclusive as possible, and sometimes the issues are divisive.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, exactly. I can remember one in particular where I thought I was probably dead, right? Literally. Do you remember it was a state central meeting at MSU, and we were voting on the issue of open primary.
Oh, okay.
And it won. The state central committee voted for an open primary by one vote. Okay.
What was your role in that convention? Were you in office in the party?
I was in office. I think I was either recording secretary or vice chair at the time. And, of course, the labor movement wanted a closed primary. Okay. And as you know, the labor movement is very influential in the Democratic Party.
Right.
Not necessarily in the broader Democratic Party, but in the organizational party. And they were against it. And I voted for the open primary. And I thought Sam Fishman would literally kill me. So a few other people, I mean, I found out later there were a lot of us that felt like we were the one vote. But
Sam was at that time.
He was the CAP director of the UAW, right.
Okay.
So he's a very powerful person.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, I thought, but I couldn't vote. I couldn't vote the other way because I think I maybe have been wrong. I think maybe a closed primary might have been more for strengthening the party, but I believe that it was right. So I voted for an open primary.
So would you? Do you think today you would support a closed primary?
Today I might support a closed primary if we were to have because I really would. I would prefer people who say they are Democrats and people who say they are Republicans to make the decisions that move things on the next step up. So I think I probably would. And you could argue both sides of the issue. La Follette certainly said an open primary was the more open way to make decisions. But I'm not sure in reality that is as helpful. So, I mean...
I'm moving out of the historical thing, but
right.
You raise an interesting point. Do you think the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are weaker because of a lack of party discipline than they were at an earlier period? Do you have that sense, or is it is that a problem for us at the present time in terms of our political lives?
I'm not sure the fact of open primaries or those, I don't think that's been the problem within the parties. I mean, discipline sometimes is substituted for control and power. And the politicians I dislike the most are the ones that are in it for the power and the control. And so I would prefer the opportunity, to have the discussions and have the discourse that may not be everybody in agreement. But so I think the problems, at least the Democratic Party is having today, is that we're going to have to figure out a way, without giving up who we are, to translate that to people outside of our party. So. And I think the Republican Party is in more trouble than they realize they are. I think the seeds of their own destruction are in the way they're behaving today, but I may not live to see that. So.
The party, you describe a background of activism and community activism, issue activism, and so on. At the same time, you reflect on the struggle within the party for control. How come they turn to you for to choose a leader in this? Someone who comes from an activist background. What was the reason for approaching Libby Maynard to say, "Will you become our work through the offices to finally become chair of the party?"
Right. I think because I'm not sure it's because I necessarily pleased them, but that they knew that I was honest with them, that I would work with them, that at least we had one goal in mind that we both agreed on, is that we felt that in terms of what happened to the state or to the nation, it was better if a Democrat got elected. Mm-hmm. So they knew they could trust me, and I think trust is important. But I certainly wasn't like a lot of them, because a lot of the, mostly men, but some women too, were really into power. I mean, Lynn, you were different in the legislature. You had colleagues that were into power, and then there were people like you that cared about the issues, and that's why you ran. I mean, you sometimes had to compromise, but people knew they could trust you, and hopefully that was why they felt there was a trust there, and that I would work hard, and that I would work to make a difference, and that I was probably I would bring people together rather than split them apart.